Today, I have this Tyco Midnight Special Sharknose, and I'm going to be tearing it down and attempting to revive it. First up, let's test this shark out. I'll give it a little bit of power as it's all set up on the track here. And I've got full power in the tracks. So far, there's nothing. I'll give it a little bit of a wiggle. And when I touch it, it is sort of doing something. I can hear that the motor is turning over, but when I let go, it's not doing anything whatsoever. So clearly, this locomotive will need a little bit of work, which is what we're going to be doing. Before I dig into this model though, why don't I show you around, and this one's actually in better cosmetic shape than a lot of the models I've been working on lately. It is missing some of the horn right here. As you can see, the paint up top is not completely perfect, but this engine isn't filthy. It's just got some normal wear for its age, which is just kind of expected. There's a little bit of paint chipping on the sides, but overall all the little details are here. Again, on the other side, there's just a little bit of paint fade and some chipping. Underneath the locomotive, you can see the front coupler's missing. You've got all the wheels up here. We'll need to replace those traction tires for sure. And on the rear, we have only one set of wheels that's actually complete, and the other, which is completely missing a wheel. I would suspect that at some point in time it's cracked. As you can see, there's also a crack on that one, but I think that wheel should be just fine, seeing as it really doesn't serve any purpose other than to keep the locomotive on the tracks, and it doesn't feel like it's about to fall out. So I have a replacement we can throw in. But other than that, this locomotive cosmetically is in pretty good shape, but obviously it needs some work mechanically. To start, I'm going to take both the trucks out of the frame of the locomotive. They're just held on by these two clips on each side, both the front and the rear, so it should be pretty simple to get them out. And just like that, both trucks have been removed. To work on them, I'm just going to kind of be flipping them over just like that. I don't really think this engine needs to go in the cradle, as the shell will just be sitting on the side, so I'm just going to be working on it like this for today. I think first of all, I will deal with the more simplistic rear truck, and then we will move on to the more complicated Powertorque power truck. So now that we have all this apart, it really does not look that bad in here. There doesn't appear to be very much dirt or anything, but I think a good cleaning will still help. Also, just before this clip and where I cut it, I went in and I put a little bit of canopy glue on these side frames right here. They both felt really loose, so I just thought I'd do that as an extra little precaution. They aren't falling out yet or anything, but it should help secure them, even though it may take a little while to dry, and I don't think it'll be any issue if I put this back on the model while that glue is just drying, because it's not really going to interfere with the wheels or anything like that. And speaking of the wheels, I can show you a little bit more in detail the issues I was having with the original wheel sets. As you can see, there's no plastic wheel on this one, which is kind of important to keep the model on the tracks. So I'm going to be replacing it with this one, which is in good shape. It's probably still going to need a little bit of a cleanup, but it really looks good. The other one here, you can see exactly where that crack is on this wheel. Again, I don't think this will be a huge issue. If I just try and turn it a little bit, it really doesn't feel like it moves that much. There's quite a bit of resistance to it. So even though it's really not the greatest, this wheel isn't powered, it's just going to be rolling freely. So for now, I'm not going to worry about it. With all that said, it's time to clean up this rear truck. It should be pretty simple. I'm just going to use a fiberglass pencil on the wheels, and then to finish cleaning up the wheels and to clean up everything else in this truck, I'm just going to be using some rubbing alcohol and some Q-tips. Now that everything here is all cleaned up, I'm going to put a little bit of fresh oil in both of these bearings and then screw everything back together and clip this truck back into the model. And for oil, I'm just going to be using some basic Labelle oil. Now that that's put back together, it's time to dig into the Powertorque truck, which hopefully should not be too difficult to deal with. So the front truck is now partially disassembled. I took this clip off, and we unscrewed the bottom plate and got the truck cover and the wheels themselves off. In terms of the truck cover, it is a little bit dirtier than the rear truck cover. However, on this one, the side frames don't seem to be falling out, so I don't need to deal with gluing those back into place. The wheels themselves look to be in pretty okay shape. As I mentioned, the traction tires are going to need to be replaced. Everything in here can do with a good cleaning, and in this part of the locomotive, especially a really good cleaning. You'll see in just a second when I show you the other side of the motor truck. If I flip it over, it's pretty disgusting here. So all these gears are going to need to come out, and we're going to have to go pretty crazy getting this thing clean. I'll use a lot of rubbing alcohol and Q-tips, as I typically do, just because I want this motor to look really good, and hopefully after that, there should be no dirt interfering with how this model runs. Before we start cleaning that though, we do have to get this plate off of the motor. Alright, and now that we got that plate off, the brushes and springs are out, and the motor itself actually looks really good. The commutator does not look that dirty. It's actually pretty good compared to some of the other Tyco ones I've seen, so that should be pretty easy to clean up. The springs themselves, both of them actually look to be in really good shape. They're not overly compressed, and they seem to be doing their job pretty well, and they actually look like a nice bright color too, which is pretty good. The brushes themselves also look to be in really good shape. There's obviously some dirt on them, but that's typical for brushes, and they don't really look worn unevenly or worn heavily, so they should be good to put back into the locomotive after we clean everything up. Now, one final step before we actually get into cleaning all the parts of this truck. I want to remove these 3 gears from the back. This one I've got to be a little bit careful with just because of the pivot gear. I do not want to break off the pivot down here, but we will get all 3 of these gears off, hopefully without any issues. So now it's time to clean out this front truck. Once again, I'm going to use a fiberglass pencil and some rubbing alcohol to get the job done. I'll start with this plate, then I'll do the truck cover, and then I'll go from there. So I just took a really brief break to charge my phone a little bit, and I did two very small things off camera. For one, I installed the traction tires on both of our wheel sets. I didn't want to make you watch me fight them, and in this case I did not use bullfrogs, not like I did the last couple of times. I just used some of the old dental bands I had laying around because those seem to work really well on these Powertorque engines. And the other thing I did is I got out a tool that we can use to put this plate back onto the motor with the springs and brushes and all, which is this little piece. So let me explain that. Typically, the correct way to put these brush plates, or brush plate covers, whatever you want to call these, back onto these Powertorque motors is to remove these little covers right here. There's some little tabs surrounding them. I'll bring it in a little bit closer. Those hold those in. However, I found that on a lot of these, those can actually break off pretty easily, and it can be a pretty huge hassle to deal with. So I think my solution, what I typically do is I'll put the spring in first on one side, then put a brush, hold it down with my finger, do it on the other side, and then cover it with this plate. And then I just hold this plate here while we mate this piece to the motor. I'll screw in one side typically, or sometimes I'll pull out this plate first, screw it all down, and then give it a test run just to make sure everything's seated properly. So before we put any more of this locomotive back together, that's going to be the first and most annoying step. Now that the plate, the brushes, the springs, and the motor have all been pushed together and screwed into place, before we go putting any oil onto anything else or reassembling anything, I do just want to test out the motor just to make sure everything got seated in there properly and nothing shifted out of place, which can happen sometimes with this technique. So I've got my controller and two leads right here, and we're just going to test this out. It'll probably make a fair bit of noise because I have not put any oil on the motor bearings yet, but I'm just checking to make sure this motor will actually start. And it seems to start, and don't worry, that was nowhere near full power, so I'm not really concerned about it bogging down. That seems to be about an appropriate speed. Now with that success, it's time to start putting some oil on all of these bearings, then putting the gears back in place, then the wheels, and then I think we can clip everything back together for good and test this model out. So the locomotive has now been fully put back together. Off camera, I quickly installed a new front coupler. As you can see, I had to bore out an old Tyco coupler with a drill bit just a little bit so I could accept a new screw into here, as it was slightly larger than the diameter of the hole in the coupler. It was a pretty simple fix, but now this model has a front coupler with a screw instead of one of the old Tyco posts. So with all those repairs out of the way and this model fully put back together, let's test it out and hopefully it starts. So the Tyco Midnight Special is set up on the track. I'll give this thing some power and we will see if this model runs. Clearly it does. That's the wrong direction though. Let's see if it'll go forwards. I think it may have stalled. There it goes. Give it more power. And it seems to be springing to life now. Drop the power just a little bit. It actually seems to run pretty quietly, which is kind of shocking for one of these old Tycos. Now that it's broken in a little bit, it seems to run pretty well at a slightly slower speed as well. This is at about 55% power. I'll bring this thing to a stop and see how it fares in reverse, or if it's still going to stutter. And I think it runs even quieter in reverse now, so I think that's a pretty huge success. This is about 5 minutes later. I've just let the model break in a little bit, and it seems to be running extremely smoothly. This is still at about 55% power, and it seems to be rolling along without any stuttering or anything, so this model might have just needed to break in a little bit. So, as I said right after I finished testing this model, this was a pretty big success. Everything seemed to go pretty smoothly, and I did not really find any issues after I tested it, which is great. The only little thing I might need to adjust is I forgot to put a little bit of oil on the, I guess you could call it the pivot, whatever you want to call it, that moves the truck back and forth, the little clip that holds it in place. I did not put any oil on that, so this one is a little bit sticky. The front truck is a little less sticky. That's something I can fix in probably 5-10 seconds, so I might do that off camera, but other than that, I think this engine should be good to go for a pretty long time.